Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's Tuesday, July 7th, 2020, and welcome to Grover Pro Percussion Tech Talk Tuesday. I'm your host, Neil Grover, and we're going to have a very interesting discussion today. Our guest is Al Kohn. Al is the house percussionist for the world's premier cruise ship, the QE2, and we're going to hear about what's required of Al, his duties, and what life is like going around the world playing music. Before I bring Al in, I just want to say I wish everybody to be safe and sane. We're all going through this pandemic together. And while it can feel isolating, we have to remember we are connected through the power and the beauty of music. So keep that in mind. And we all have ups and downs, but the important thing is to move forward, stay positive, and know that we're going to come out of this. It's not forever. It's just going to take some time. So one other thing, we invite your questions for Al or for me. If you have anything you want to ask, place it in the comments section, and certainly we're going to get to it today. So without wasting any more time, I want to welcome Al Kohn aboard. He's coming up the gangplank now. I can see that. Al, are you with us?
Here we are.
Hey, yep. Al, welcome.
How
are you doing?
Thank you. Not quite on the QE2 though. The QE2 was actually retired in 2008 in Dubai.
I am so sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. It went along for many years. In fact, my former roommate, who was a Cunarder for 37 years, who was a guitar player in the orchestra that I've been in, worked on the QE2 from 1983 until 2008 when it had been retired.
So, Al, are you on the QE3?
Actually, the QE3 is just called the QE, and my current position that I'm in is unique because I'm in what is called the rotating Royal Court Theatre Orchestra for Cunard. And what that entails is that I go on all three ships, soon to be four, in the fleet about twice a year. That would be the Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Victoria, and the Queen Mary II. Not all in that order necessarily, but what we do is we play during the vacation time that the regular theater orchestra on those ships takes their break from. So they go off as one group. We come on as one group. We'll be on between 6 to 8 weeks at a time, and then we'll transship to another ship. And when we finish our third ship, then we get our break.
What does transship mean?
Transship literally means going from one ship to the other. So
you do that in port.
Exactly. So we could be in Southampton, England, in port with, say, if I'm on the Queen Elizabeth and I'm next to go to Queen Victoria, we could be in the same port at the same time, no matter where it is, and just go from one ship to the other. Or, if necessary, we fly from the location that we're at to the location where the ship we're supposed to next go to.
Right. And so when you do, well, you know what? We're going to get to this. I want to back up. Al, please share with us your background, because I know you were in New York for a while, and I know you play great drums because I've seen clips of you. You're a fantastic jazz drummer, and you play concert percussion. So back us up. Where are you originally from, and take us through your training?
Okay. Well, the short haul of it is I was born in New Jersey in Englewood, and my schooling pretty much started in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I started studying when I was about 10 years old back in 1972, just on snare drum like most people. I've never actually taken a serious drum set lesson in my life, but what I have done is applied the classical training that I have had to that in terms of reading, along with listening to as many different genres of music as I possibly can. So I'm classically trained. In high school, I studied between high school and college, I studied with just about in a way with almost every member of the percussion section of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra during the late 70s and the early 80s, along with having had Dr. William Albin as my professor and instructor at Miami University in Ohio. So I've had Dick Jensen and Ed Wiebold, who retired many years ago, and have also had master classes at Miami with Bill Platt, who was the section leader at that time.
Bill's a good friend of mine, great player.
Right. And Eugene Espino, affectionately known as Chico, who, as you know, passed away quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
Who was a master timpanist, one of the finest timpanists that I've ever heard.
Yeah. He was a beautiful player. So when you were in school, when you came out of school, how did you first break into the business?
Like a lot of musicians, I had a 9-to-5 job at first, and I was trying to get as many different music jobs as I could while I was doing that. So I did a lot of community theater. I broke in with a lot of different bands that were trying to get noticed, get recording contracts. So I did a lot of demo work with them. I did some club date work that was available at the time. Mm-hmm. I arrived in New York in 1985, and a lot was happening. In fact, the way that it was described to me when I first got to New York was I was basically told, you're 2 years too late. If you wanted to study with someone here and you wanted to get work through that, you should have been here a couple years ago. And in a way, it was true, because at that time, drum machines were pretty much taking over in the jingle business, and DJs were taking a lot of the club date work, but there was still plenty of live music out there. And so I was working on getting into theater, hoping that I could possibly get some pit work on Broadway. And I got, after about being in New York for 10 years, through a very good friend, involved in community band and community orchestra work again. So I was able to get my classical chops back in gear with that. And one of the fondest memories that I have of that is being with the Kingsborough Community Orchestra in Brooklyn. And every summer, we would do a series of 5 concerts that were outdoors out in Manhattan Beach in Brooklyn. And usually, at least on one of those concerts, I would get featured as a xylophone soloist. Oh. So I get to play some George Hamilton Green or some Harry Brewer, or even some what we call popsicle, little pop classical things like Comedians Gallop or Saber Dance.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. That must have been a lot of fun.
It was, absolutely.
And what year was that?
Especially playing 1812 on July 4th. Yeah. And standing right near the miniature 1812 cannons.
Yeah.
You put a lot of cotton in the ears.
Well, somebody asked me about the tradition of that, playing the 1812, because as we know, the 1812 overture written by Tchaikovsky celebrates the Russian victory over Napoleon.
Right.
Not exactly a patriotic work. So it was really started by Arthur Fiedler here in Boston with the Boston Pops, I think in the early 70s, just before I started playing. And he chose it because of the cannons, and it's loud and raucous. And there's a theme in there that a lot of us who have a certain age remember was used on the Quaker puffed rice commercials. They say "shot from guns," and then they play da 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 bang. It has nothing to do, it actually has, and it couldn't be any more non-patriotic. It's a Russian tune. Figure it out.
True. Yeah. But it still gets a great response from the audience. They love it.
They love it. They love it. And so you were playing in the concert band this summer. You are a soloist. You have a very strong mallet background. How many years was it before you connected with the cruise industry?
I first connected with the cruise industry around 2001. On a whim, I had seen an ad for auditions in The Village Voice, which was a trade paper in New York, basically in Greenwich Village. It was centered in.
Right.
And there was an ad from the agent who I do and get work with through now, Pro Ship Entertainment, saying to come out for an audition that was in Manhattan, in the city. It was basically like a cattle call. They were auditioning musicians for rhythm section. So I went in there and I gave them a resume, and they had full sections playing together to see how we would gel together, and then also to see how our reading was. We would read some production show music material to a click track so that they could see how well we could follow a click and stay in time with it. And then we would also play various styles. So we'd play something swing, something in a Latin feel like a rumba, or what my percussion instructor, Bill Alvin, will appreciate this. He'll laugh on this: club date rumba versus Cuban rumba.
Yeah, I know
And
exactly. Yeah.
right. Or something in the feel of a bossa, just to see how our knowledge was of different dance styles, because that was part of the gig, not just playing in the theater, but also playing for people that dance as well.
Right. And for people who don't know, your orchestra would play by yourselves, but also different headline acts come through the show.
That's correct.
Tips, and they throw music in front of you, like on an afternoon. They walk on and you rehearse, and
Absolutely.
then that night you're playing their show.
That's right. That's right. Usually what happens is that most of the time we're in the theater. And as you said, the entertainer comes on, they have their suitcase with music, and they've already selected what they want to do for their show. And we get it. And sight reading is critical at that point, especially if you haven't been with that particular line at that point. You're just learning the acts, because a lot of these acts will come on from time and time again. You don't just see them once and then that's it. But when you're in the learning process of those acts, sight reading is a critical ability to have, along with knowing all your genres, knowing all your styles, all your feel. And for a drummer, it's not just being able to read everything note for note on the page, which most of the time you're not doing. Most of the time as a drummer, it's kind of like being in a big band. You're using the chart as a roadmap. So it's knowing your way from A to B, and you're composing on sight within the style that you need to. Even if you're playing for a classical entertainer, you still want to stay within that feel. And sometimes, depending on what's in your memory, you can, if you hear something that's better than what's written on the page, and you can come to an agreement with that entertainer, you can embellish on that if it works.
Right. And I'm assuming the charts have essential kicks and phrases.
That's correct.
Layout.
Yeah.
And so it's important. It sounds to me like you have to be super versatile, because you're probably playing across every possible genre and style of music.
That's correct. One night I could be playing for a classical flautist. The next night I could be playing for a violinist. The next night I could be playing for a rock guitar. The next night I could be playing for a juggler. And it's like a trip to the circus. One of my very good friends that I work with, which I'll give a shout out to, Pete Matthews, who's a juggler in the UK. And I've worked with a whole lot on ships, from when I was at Royal Caribbean to all the time that I've been on Cunard. And with his show, you really have to pay attention to what's going on, what he's doing. His charts are really simple. Most of it is just slash, 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 slash across the bar, and it tells you what style you need to be playing in. So if you're playing CC Rider, you know that you have to be playing in a gospel Elvis kind of style. But at the same time, you're looking up at what Pete's doing, and you have to hit a lot of those things the same way that you would be if you were a circus drummer.
Wow, that's hard. That's hard.
Again, it's kind of like being a big band, being in a big band, being a big band drummer, and setting up what the ensemble is doing. Except that instead of setting it up, you're actually with Pete while you're doing it.
Right. Al, how big is the band that you work with on the ship?
The band that I work with on the ship is 8 pieces. We have a full rhythm section of piano, bass, guitar, and drums. And then we have 2 reed players, alto and tenor sax, that also double on clarinet and flute. And we have 1 trumpet and 1 trombone. This is scaled down from what it used to be all the way back in what a lot of my musician friends that have worked on ships consider the glory days. Back in the 80s into the early 90s, bands on ships could be as big as 17 pieces.
Wow.
But they got scaled down to the year before I joined Royal Caribbean in 2003. They had 2 trumpets and they had 2 trombones and they had 3 sax players. They included a bari. And the year that I joined in 2003, they had gotten rid of the bari.
I see.
And when still there.
Yeah.
There we go.
And one of the musicians, I'm assuming, is the music director, is appointed music director.
Right, that is correct. Yeah. We don't actually have a conductor on stage. The music director is usually one of the musicians. It could be anybody. It could be the drummer. It could be the pianist.
Right.
It could be the trombonist. My music director happens to be the trombonist of the group.
And do you often play to click or pre-record tracks to sweeten it or some way?
That's correct. On the production shows are usually on click track, not because they're concerned that the musicians can't keep time, but because there's so much happening on stage between scene changes and lighting, and everything is fired off from a computer. So the production staff that are involved in making all those changes and working with the lighting and the sound, everything's tied down to a computer. So it all has to be synchronized, and it's synchronized to the click.
And for those people out, just for the benefit of those who may not know what a production show is, that's a Broadway type show or a Las Vegas type show where there's large cast. Yeah.
That's correct. And usually those casts will be on board for anywhere between 6 to 8 months at a time.
Oh, that long. Wow. So they were under contract also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So Al, I think a lot of people would wonder what life on the ship is like for you. So how many nights, days a week do you work? How many days off? And what are the living accommodations like?
Okay, well, the accommodations that the musicians usually have, the musicians that I work with, normally you share a cabin with another musician. So there's usually 2 of you to a cabin. They're not the tiniest in the world, but they're not the largest in the world. You usually have enough room to be able to move around. Surprisingly, there's a lot of storage space versus the actual size of the cabin itself. On my particular cruise line, in a lot of cases, you can actually store things under the bed as well as in cupboards and on shelves as well. So it's designed to allow you to be able to move around, still to be small enough to be able to house the amount, of crew that we have on board.
Right. And as far as working, is it 6 days a week, pretty much? 1 day off a week?
It varies from time to time. A lot of times I'll actually be working about 7 days a week. It all depends on the entertainers that are on, and also the schedule of productions as well. And plus there are other places that I'm playing besides the theater. One of the biggest detractors for me for Cunard Line was the amount of musicians that we have on each ship. Cunard Line has always been pro live music, which is a great thing for me. So we've had a string quartet unfortunately now it's a string trio, but they're still there. And we have a harpist. We have many pianists that are playing in the various venues that are not theater oriented. We have a ballroom orchestra, which is the same size as the Royal Court Theater Orchestra, with the addition of a male singer that is usually playing guitar and a female vocalist as well. And a lot of the times that I'm not in the theater, I might be doing either a jazz set, or I might be doing a big band ball, which combines both the Royal Court Theater Orchestra and the Queen's Room Ballroom Orchestra. Or I may be doing I don't know if this is politically correct or not at all. Let's just call it traditional jazz. I'll do a trad jazz set in one of the pubs playing 1920s or early teens or early 30s music.
Right, right. And when you move around, all the equipment's set up for you already, or do you have to do that?
That's correct. We have production staff that move the equipment around. That's part of their job. And there are multiple drum sets on board. So there's always a drum set that's available for that particular venue without having to take from one and bring it to the other. And where I come in as far as setup is mainly just tweaking the setup itself, or say bringing in my own cymbals. As I come on board with my own cymbals and some small little percussion items as well that they might not have on the ship.
And what do you do about practicing? If you want to practice, can you get into the ballroom or one of the rooms when they're not being used in practice?
That's a tricky thing. A lot of the times there's so many different things that are happening in the theater or in the ballroom that I'm not able to get onto an actual drum set. So what I will do is work out on a pad in the cabin that I'm in at an appropriate time. And also it's essentially, working the hands and feet together even when you don't have a pad to sit with, just to get comfortable with how, I can have a chart in front of me. And the way I practice that chart, if I need to practice that chart before a rehearsal, if I get ahead of time and I need to see what's going on, I could do that, basically just moving the hands and feet so that I know what's going to be happening on the chart itself.
Right. Well, I'm imagining you're playing so much on the ship, 6-7 days a week, that in a way you're playing all the time. You probably don't need to practice much at all.
Well, that's, every day is a practice session.
Right.
And if I've got a show that's giving me a bit of a challenge, then what I might do is I might give up some dinner time after rehearsal, because usually rehearsal occurs about 2 hours or so prior to dinner. And so I'll give up about an hour of my dinner time just to run things through by myself on stage when everybody else has left the stage. And then go have a short dinner, get myself ready for the shows.
Right, right. Interesting. You and I, before we went on air, were having a nice conversation, which I'd like to revisit, and it's about the importance of professionalism, the business of music. So can you reiterate so everyone else can hear what you were telling me, which I agree with 100% about professionalism?
Right. Well, I learned this a long time ago, and some of it's taken a while to come into practice from when I was much younger. But it's very, very important that when you get into a job like this, working on ships, and even higher, especially in higher level position, like touring with a professional outfit, or working in a Broadway pit, or even as yourself, playing in symphony orchestra or in the ballet. When you get to this level, it's only about 2% the musician that you are. It's only about 2% about what you're playing, because they already know that you're a player. They know that you can hack this stuff. They heard you behind the screen. They heard you on the audition. They know you can play. When you get to that level, it's about who you are, how you operate, how well do you work with other people. That's part and
Right.
part the business end of it.
Right.
That you need to be able to work with people, even if there are disagreements. There's a
Right.
professional way to handle disagreements. And the better you are at dealing with people, and especially when you have a situation where you have to go through problem resolutions,
Hmm.
to be
Hmm.
able to do it in a calm or professional manner. That's what the leaders and the contractors are looking at when they
Right.
decide whether or not they want to hire you, because they already know that you're a player.
Right. And I would imagine in an environment that you're in where it's this constant change with new acts, if things pop up, you need to be able to resolve them collegially and professionally and calmly.
That's right. I can have an act, and there can be things going on with the orchestra, and the bass player might turn to me and say, "Can you do something here? Because I don't hear this going on in other places, and it will help me if you do this." And you might not particularly agree with that, but the bass player, as a drummer, he's your co-pilot. You're both co-pilots. You need to be able to work together, and you can't be in a position where you're fighting each other.
Right.
So sometimes you have to come out with a compromise and say, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
Let's see if this works. The
Right.
best example I can think of is I've had orchestras, and one of my favorite bass players that I've worked with, he came to me after one rehearsal and said, Al, I know that you need to hit what the brass are accenting, what their ensembles is playing, but they're not quite with the rhythm section. Can you do me a favor? Can you find a way to do this, but also be able to keep a strong backbeat as well? Because that will help me, because it will feel more comfortable.
Right.
So I have to go into my brain and think, okay, how am I going to accomplish this? What can I draw from my experience or what I've heard? For me, that immediately goes back to Count Basie and one of his best drummers in the world that he ever had, Sonny Payne. Sonny had a way of kicking the horns with the kick drum and still keeping a strong backbeat going on the snare. And he would combine the two so that he had the best of all worlds. And I thought, this is what's going to get me through this. That way I could keep both sides happy.
Well, that's a great way to look at it, Alan. And when you're describing how you approach that issue, it's very thoughtful. You think about not only what's happening in here, but what your colleagues need, and I'm sure they really appreciate all that work and thought that you'd put into something like that.
Yeah. Well, again, you're looking at the bigger picture. You're looking at when you're on stage and you're in the orchestra. This is the way that my former roommate described it to me. We're not the stars. We're backing the people that are out there on the stage. Forgive the expression, wiggling their bum. So it's up to us to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
So in the end, it comes down, it's a sale.
Yeah.
As my jazz band director from college, Jim Alcott, used to tell me, this is a sale. If we had a great night, or if we had a good night, but it wasn't quite what he expected, he wouldn't say, oh, it was a good night. He would say, we made the sale. And you're making the sale by making it work, by
Right.
keeping it together.
Right. Right. Right.
And in
Interesting.
order to do that, you have to see the big picture. You can't just go, well, I'm the drummer, and so everyone's got to go with me, and I should be able to play what I want, and everyone's going to follow. And that you have
Right.
to be able to have your ears and your eyes in all places at one time and go,
Right.
okay, how do I make this work for everybody? And it doesn't always come together the way that you'd like it to, but if you can do it to keep pretty much 95% of it going together, then it works.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so, Al, how many years has it been you've been on the seas?
I've been working at sea almost 18 years now. I started this in March of 2003. And I did a 1 month experimental contract on Holland America just to see how the gig would work. And then I went to Royal Caribbean, and I spent 6 years with Royal Caribbean.
Wow.
And then after I left Royal Caribbean in 2009, I went to Cunard. And I'm in my 11th year with Cunard Line now.
Well, congratulations. That's great. Great track record.
Thank you.
Yeah. We have, Al, a question here from Joel. Let's see. Do you only play shows or do cocktail parties and evening combo gigs? I think you touched on that.
Yeah. I haven't played any parties per se, but as I did say, on the nights, let's say, for example, that there's an entertainer in the theater that does not use the orchestra. I could be either doing a combo set. For example, on Queen Mary 2, they also have, besides all the other musicians that I mentioned, they also have a jazz trio. It's the only ship in the fleet that has its own jazz trio. But they need a night off every now and then. And if that coincides with a night that there's a guest entertainer that doesn't use the orchestra, they'll take our rhythm section and we'll play a combo set with a couple of our horns. Say we'll do one set, we'll do two sets that night. One set, say, we'll have the trumpet and tenor sax along with the rhythm section. And then the next set we'll have, let's say, trombone and the alto sax together for that set. And we'll basically play from the Great American Songbook.
Right.
And again, knowing all your different styles comes in, because just because you're playing the American Songbook doesn't mean you're going to be swinging the night away. You can be playing bossa. You could be playing a little bit of, light salsa. You could be playing a samba.
Right. So, who makes that call? Is there an overall music director on the ship, or is that the entertainment director that might make that call?
It's a combination of both. The music director and the entertainment director work on the schedule together of events. I think the ultimate, I could be wrong on this, but the ultimate decision comes from the entertainment director, who is a step above the music director.
Right.
Everybody is part of the hotel department on the ship.
Right. Oh, you call it a hotel?
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. Al, in all the years and your experiences on ships, is there one act that stands out, or that you might have really, really enjoyed, or that's different, or that you can pick out?
It's hard to narrow it down to one. One that I probably most enjoy, not necessarily on a musical standpoint, but just the sheer enjoyment of being on stage, is with my friend Pete Matthews, the juggler, because his combination of juggling and comedy, it's kind of like Lucy and Desi on acid. It's just constantly forward motion. It's like, think of a Buddy Rich drum solo and how the ideas are continually flowing, and then throw that into comedy along with the juggling, and it's just nonstop. You can't get bored at all. You have to constantly be paying to what's going on. And some of the jokes that are flying around are almost strictly for the band. We'll be laughing our heads off. The audience is going, okay.
Speaking of, you mentioned Buddy Rich, I saw a video of you being featured on a drum solo. That's just phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
Is that's on YouTube? Can people find that on YouTube?
It's not on YouTube. I could probably put it on YouTube. I've hesitated because I'm not sure about the rules with Cunard. But I imagine I might be able to put that up. Well, I'm actually looking at a way on Facebook to make that solo public, that clip.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It features you, and the band walks off stage and lets you do your thing. and the solo is so well crafted and has form and builds excitement. I really enjoyed it, Al, very much. Thank you for sharing it with me. My friend Diana in Puerto Rico has a question. Who calls the auditions? We're interested. Where can people basically find out about auditions for the ships?
Okay. There's several ways that you could go about this. I thought about this actually before we started the interview, how I would answer this. When I originally started looking into this, as I said, I had seen an ad in a newspaper for auditions that were being held for an agent. That's one way. That particular agent now, they have a website. They've had a website for very many years. So what you can actually do is go online and you can Google cruise ship musician agents, and you'll see websites for the different agents. And what they will require you to do, in part, is to send them something of yourself, if you can, playing. They may have, like some of them have charts that you can download a PDF of. And if you can record some kind of a video of yourself playing those and then send it back to them. The way that I had gone about this, I did the one live audition. When I went to audition for Royal Caribbean, I actually did not do it through the agent. And this audition happened around the same year that I did the Pro Ship Entertainment audition in New York that I told you about. I called the office of Royal Caribbean at that time to ask who was in charge of contracting musicians for the ships. They gave me that name, and I called that person, and that person said to me over the phone, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to give me the fax number of somewhere where you could pick up some music. And you're going to get that music, and you're going to call me on the phone, and you're going to put down the phone, and you're going to play this music for me over the phone. This was when I was living in Brooklyn, and I had my drum set up in my basement studio. And then once I played through those charts, then he asked me to play different styles of music, just as I did for the Pro Ship audition. So this is another way. I think the way that Pro Ship asks you to do things now is that they actually, if you're in an area and you're set up to do this, they will actually ask you to do an audition over the internet video so that they can see and hear you and take a video of what you're doing so that they have it on file. I'm not sure if that's exactly the way that they do it, but the idea is that they want something on file of you doing what you do so that they can show it to the other lines.
So basically what you're saying is you have to find the agent or the right person to audition for.
Right. And I think that mostly now people are going through agents in order to get these jobs.
And the agents, I'm assuming, take a commission or something.
Right, yeah. Some take a commission. They'll take a certain portion from you that you send them in every month. Or like in my case, the cruise line actually pays the commission as part of what they don't actually take it out of my salary. It actually comes from the cruise line itself.
I see. I understand.
So they're actually paying for the service of sending me through. So whatever salary I'm quoted and I'm going to receive, that's the actual salary that I get. And I'm not required to actually send a percentage of that each month or each week to the agent. The cruise line is actually doing that.
Handle that. So speaking of salary, so my understanding is that all your expenses are basically taken care of on the ship. You don't pay for anything. And
pretty much. The travel expenses are paid for getting to work and coming home from work. Your room is paid for, and the food, provided that you only eat the food that is provided in the messes that you are designated to eat at. That is also paid for.
So you don't eat in the guest areas. You have special cafeteria or mess halls for the employees.
Right. I can eat in the guest area, but I have to get permission in order to be able to do that, and it needs to be in a non-peak time. And you have to be in uniform, and again, you have to be professional out there. You can't be the way that you would be walking down what we call the I-95 or the Burma Road out in Crew area and just let yourself down and just be who you want to be. You've got to maintain professionalism when you're out there in public.
Right. And if you happen to get ill on the ship, I know there's doctors on the ship. Does a cruise line take care of that as well if you need?
That is correct. There is a doctor that is there for you on the ship. If you either get some kind of infection or flu, anything that you need antibiotics for, or if you just need cold medicine to stave off a cold, there were rules that, and I'm only mentioning this now because I figured the question is going to come up anyway. If for any reason you get sick and you are nauseous, or the other way, which I won't mention literally, then you have to drop everything you do and you have to go back to your cabin. You have to contact the medical center and they will isolate you until you've gotten through this, usually between 24 to 48 hours, so that it doesn't spread across the ship.
And where would they isolate you? In a separate cabin or something?
They would isolate you in the medical center. They have compartments, rooms in the medical center that are specially exactly for that. It's the same thing as they do for a guest if a guest gets really sick, because what we don't want to do is have a case of, say, norovirus spreading across the ship. Much the same as what happened across the country here with norovirus, because all it takes is one, and if he's out there, he can be a super spreader to a lot of other people. So it's a very similar situation. The idea is to isolate that case as soon as you can, so that it doesn't spread.
Right. Al, I knew we would get here anyway, and I don't want to make this the focus point of this discussion, but I think it's important that people understand, like my concerts have been canceled, like none of the musicians I know are working right now. So you've had to leave the ship, and I know you're in, I really don't want to say exactly where you're in, but you're in Michigan.
Indiana.
Indiana, I'm sorry. Well,
that's okay.
Western New Jersey, I don't know. So,
go back to my roots.
And you don't keep an apartment because it doesn't make sense. You're live on the ship.
That's right.
So if you wouldn't mind sharing your thought, what you did, because I think it's a smart business move, exactly what you did.
Right. When I started doing this back in 2003, I figured that I would be doing this between 9 and 10 months out of the year. So it just seemed like it didn't pay for me to maintain an apartment or home year-round. Because if I'm not going to be there for most of the year, what am I paying for?
Right.
And if I could have somebody sublet that home, but then, like another friend of mine who owns several properties, again, my former roommate, he had to hire somebody in order to oversee those properties and make sure that they were maintained properly and that the people who were in them, who were living in them, didn't trash them. So all this runs into money. Now, in his case, he was able to do that because he had been a veteran of the business for over 30 years and 20 years when he had started getting into real estate. And so, having been in his 20s, in the 70s, when there was a lot of work going on in London, as well as what it would have been like here in the States, he made a lot of money just playing music. But he also had a very, very high business sense, and he knew how to put that money aside so that he could use it, he could grow that money. Not everybody has that kind of luck. And in my case, I came in to starting to get into the music business after I graduated from college in 1985. 1985 was a completely different scenario from 1975. So I don't have to go into that. So
Right.
by the time I was 40 and I started working on cruise ships, I didn't have a whole lot to build on.
Right.
So the best next move for me to do was just to eliminate as much overhead as I possibly could. And that actually meant selling my drums as well. I had a lot of gear, but I decided that I don't know how long this run is going to be. So forever how long it is, when I come out of it, I will make sure that I have enough money to buy some of that gear that I was using back again and
Mhm.
start working on land again.
Right.
When I finally start, working on ships.
And you couldn't take your equipment with you anyway on the ship.
That's right. And even if I could, it would be an expensive deal.
So you'd be
Um,
paying the storage. So that's more
right.
money going out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there's one case where one of the drummers in the line actually keeps an electronic set on the ship that he's on for practice purposes. But he's on that ship for 4 to 6 months.
Right.
And he lives out in Europe, in Italy. So it would be nothing for him to transport that from
Got,
London back to Italy.
got
Plus,
it.
it's a small electronic ship. It's not a full set of drums.
Right. Right. Got it. Got it.
Right.
Well, that's Al. This has been a very fascinating talk. I've tried to cover aspects of it that I know uh, percussionists would like to hear about, because I mean it's a very viable, and you've made a great career of it, and you have a lot more years to make music, but it's not one that a lot of players in school typically think about pursuing. So I think it's been really valuable for you to share your perspective with us. I know you're landlocked right now, and uh, you know, I know we'll all get back to work, hopefully sooner rather than later. And but I appreciate you spending time with us today. Is there anything else you wanted to add that maybe I didn't get to ask?
Well, there's something that you and I discussed before we went on that I would like to bring up, which is that, again, this is as much a business, no matter where you are in music. This is as much a business as it is in art. And it's important that when you're earning the money that you are in this, that you put something away. None of us planned for a pandemic, but I don't think I'd be able to manage the way that I am right now if I hadn't had something set aside so that at least it was a foundation to build on or to be able to manage. Every time I go on a break, I realize that there's a certain amount of money that I need to be able to live on during that break. So I always make sure that my finances are together enough in order to be able to do that. You have to plan for the lulls. Nobody planned for a lull like this, but you have to plan for the lulls in general, because we're just like insurance salesmen and stockbrokers. We're only as good as the last sale. My father was an insurance salesman. He'd sell one policy, but when he sold another policy, he knew he had to sell another one besides that. And so he was constantly working on multiple different things at one time. The best piece of advice I was given by a musician in Brooklyn was that when you're on the current contract, always be working on getting the next one. Because that way, at least if there's a lull in between, it's minimal.
Right. And now, as far as putting money away, which I think is very, very important, and I think a lot of people are realizing that now, unfortunately, due to the crisis. What percentage would you say put a certain percentage away into a savings if you could? What would that be?
I would say make sure I can't lock it down to a particular number. But what I am saying is that take a hard look at what you think your expenses are going to be on your downtime, and then try to maintain an amount that is at least a small amount more than what those expenses would be. Always make sure that you have some kind of an emergency cushion.
Right. Right. It never hurts. And sometimes it's just a matter of, not getting a cappuccino every day and putting that money in the bank or something.
Exactly. And that
might
can
not
come, you can't imagine how much money you can actually save by cutting down on things like that. I live right next to a Starbucks, and I could easily walk over there and get a vanilla latte and a cookie and sit down, and I've already spent $8, $9.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money for that.
Yes, it is.
But you realize you're in Starbucks versus being in your room making yourself a cup of coffee. It's
Right.
always going to be more expensive to eat out than it is to
Right.
cook for yourself.
Right.
So to balance that, allow yourself at least once or twice, especially in the situation that we're in now.
Yeah.
And things have opened up a little bit in terms of opening up the economy. Allow yourself once or twice a week to just get out and sit in a restaurant if you can, or just have a cup of coffee, but minimize it as opposed to going out every day for that cup of coffee. You don't
Right.
need to go out every day for that cup of coffee, but allow yourself once or twice a week to be able to do it, just to balance yourself out so that you don't go insane from cabin fever.
Right. No, absolutely. Well, Al, this has been great. That's great advice. I appreciate you spending time with us today. And we've been corresponding through Facebook and things for a long time, so it's great to face to face with you. I hope the next time is on a ship, because I'd love to take a cruise and hear you.
That would be wonderful. I just want to do one other thing. I'd like to wish you a very happy birthday.
Oh, thank
as
you.
it is your birthday today.
Thank you.
And
Yes,
we also have two other very important birthdays that we need to celebrate.
I know
they couldn't be on the more opposite ends of the spectrum in music. Yes. Today is Gustav Mahler's birthday, and it is also Ringo Starr's birthday.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I don't mind being third on that list. It's Mahler and Ringo Starr are both giants in very different ways. Yeah. And I enjoy both of them equally. Yeah. All right, Al, thank you so much. Listen, I wish you well. We'll stay in touch. And thank you for sharing your knowledge, experience, and expertise with all of us in the percussion world today. Al, thank you so much.
Thank you. And it's been an honor. Thank you very much.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Once again, if you want to see more of these tech talks and educational videos, they're on our Facebook site. Or if you go to our YouTube channel, Grover Pro Perk, we have tons of videos, how to do things, how not to do things, and a lot of educational material that's there. If you want more information about our products and to find some downloads that you could use for your students and yourself as well, groverpro.com. Click on Tech Talk. I'll be with you guys next Tuesday. Our guest is Julie Davila. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you for sharing my birthday with me, and I wish everybody a great week. Bye-bye now.